So good afternoon. The time is now 1 o'clock. And with me today, I have Aaron Wong, the CFO of NeoDynamics, who will update us on the latest developments, the right issue, etc. And I would like to welcome the participants as well. It's a sunny day here in Copenhagen. And as I understand, the same goes for Stockholm. Just some practical issues. First of all, if you want to post a question, please post it on your lower right side in the chat, and I will forward the questions to Aaron during the presentation. So, Aaron, welcome to you, and please go on with the presentation.
Hi, good afternoon, Glass. Thank you very much for hosting myself and NeoDynamics today on a sunny day in Stockholm. So, if I could just take the presentation. Excellent. So just to recap, the vision of NeoDynamics is to be the standard in ultra-guided breast biopsies using our innovative pulse technology. What I want to kind of start with really is the rights issue, which we completed in March, and we're just tying up the final pieces now. We raised 69 million crowns before transaction costs, and we had a subscription rate of 53%, which we believe is positive sentiment toward NeoDynamics. And given the uncertainty in the market and just the unprecedented times we're seeing at the moment, we feel that this is a positive outcome for NeoDynamics. And the delta up to the 100% we filled with guarantor commitments. So a big part of that was to set the foundation for our listing on the NASDAQ First North Growth Market. And we did it for a number of reasons, because as you may be aware, private and institutional investors who reside outside of Sweden actually find it difficult to trade in the NeoDynamics share. The NASDAQ market, or the NASDAQ First North Growth Market, has a much broader audience and is more widely known internationally. So as I'll go on a bit later on in the presentation, our entry into the US will no doubt mean that more US-based investors will want to invest with NeoDynamics, and this will give them a better platform to do so. And it's also a seal of professionalism and conduct being listed on a I would say, main market or a more well-known market, which is an important milestone in the company's journey. And scheduled for the 2nd of May will be our first day of trading on the NASDAQ First North. And before then, on the 28th, so this week, we will press release a supplementary document on our website. And this will contain information about our equity and net debt and working capital and ownership structure, which what it would look like essentially after the new share issue.
And you will have last trading day on Spotlight Friday this week then? That's
correct, exactly. Yeah. And we delist Friday and they relist on Monday.
And the stockholders shouldn't do anything, you know.
That's correct. Exactly. Everything will be taken care of. So there's no need to act as a shareholder in the NeoDynamics share. That's a good point. So I think this slide has been shown before, but I think it's a really nice slide to outline the upcoming 3 to 4 years in our journey and where we're going to focus on. So at the moment, we have ongoing European commercialization and launch, where we have sales teams in Sweden, Germany, and the UK live introducing the product in selected clinics and hospitals. We're really focusing on our pilot studies and reference clinics, which will then allow us to sort of springboard into the USA, and the USA will sort of lean on the hopefully positive and successful launch in Europe In February this year, we submitted our 510K application for the FDA, which was received. And after that, we want to move into China in 2024. And looking at the USA, we have on board now a gentleman called Magnus Precht, who did a very good presentation with you. And I would suggest everybody to go and watch it. And he has many, many years of experience in the USA on the ground in med tech. And with the FDA approval, the process and the pathway to China will be quicker, because China really does look on what happens in the US as their regulatory bodies kind of refer to those processes.
Yes, you can piggyback on the approvals you receive in US for the Chinese market.
Exactly, precisely.
Yeah. Could you elaborate, just very short, Aaron, sorry, could you elaborate a little on Europe, because you've been in European markets now for a while, and you also gained a lot of experience, and as I remember, you focus more on clinics instead of the public system, and of course there's a obvious reason to that. But could you very short just describe what your experiences are from European market?
Absolutely. So, I mean, as we've kind of touched on in previous presentations, we have unfortunately been one of the victims of the protracted COVID situation, which means that we haven't really had the chance to be physical. Our salespeople haven't had the chance to actually be in hospitals and clinics. However, now that's opening up, we see that activities are starting to ramp up. And I was actually in the UK a couple of weeks ago in a place called Wickham, which is just outside of London, talking to the radiology department, and they're extremely positive about the technology. And it's just a case of getting the technology really in front of the doctors in order for them to showcase it to the rest of their colleagues. But overall, very positive sentiment coming out of the hospitals.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Aaron.
And then I guess because the USA really is in focus for us, I wanted to just touch on the players in the market. And if we see this kind of pie graph, we see the sort of three main largest players in the biopsy market being Becton and Dickinson, Mammotone, who are owned by Leica, and then Hologic. All of these companies have actually out-licensed, or they've bought the technology and they haven't developed it necessarily themselves. And more than half of the global market is actually based in the US. And this is due to the way the reimbursement structure is constructed, essentially. Doctors are expected to have a much stronger case for the management and diagnosis of cancer, which means they actually take more biopsies. So there's actually legality behind the way they do it in the US. And just to give you an idea, US doctors take on average 8 biopsies per patient versus just 2 or 3 in Europe. So the market there is enormous. So we're very much looking forward to receiving some positive news back from the FDA so we can continue to move forward in the US. And we kind of expect that to be in the later parts of the first half of the year, with sort of a kind of go live in Q3 or Q4.
So due to the structure, 8 biopsies, that's quite a lot. Because I know from your product, you really save time, both man hours, but also in terms of staff, and which is a very good value proposition towards the reimbursement system in US. It's primarily the insurance companies dictating that, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And I'll go on a bit later into kind of how to set the expectations towards the market, because I think it's important to understand what NeoDynamics wants to do in terms of creating volume out of the product. Perhaps it's not as clear as it could be made. So I'll kind of go into it.
Just to return to the pie chart, Aaron. So you have agreements with the, what is that? Is that 80% of the market already? Yeah, which of course validates the case a lot. Are you going to do some internal sales though? So Pract is of course responsible for US, but so he's going to work together with these three guys like Hologic and Becton Dickinson.
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, in terms of the partnership and the expectation on how we ramp up volumes, there are a couple of different ways to actually go about it, but those ways we haven't mapped out yet. But that is certainly one way in which the volumes could be created, would be to work in partnership with some of the bigger players in perhaps a distribution setting.
Okay, good.
Which then leads me nicely on to the SBI Congress in Savannah, Georgia, in the USA. So a few of us are going out in May to watch a gentleman called Professor Mark Till, who is he's a key opinion leader, and he's also an expert in his field and in our area, and he'll be presenting some really interesting data on our pulse study. So, I mean, firstly, investors can expect great exposure of the product in the US, and like I say, opinion pieces by the professor. And I mean, Professor Mark, he has worked internationally, and he has a very broad network of colleagues in different countries. So he'll provide insight into how key opinion leaders work and also how they think. And sort of what he says, other hospitals and doctors do tend to follow. So he's a very big advocate for the pulse technology. And as I alluded to, he'll present a set of new data which hasn't been seen before, which essentially is a subgroup of 50 patients out of 140 that had high risk and complex axillary lymph node sampling taken. And these are hard to reach places, not normally accessible by needle biopsy. But with FlexiPulse, they actually had a success rate or an efficacy rate of 98%, which is a very strong indication that you can actually replace surgical extraction of lymph nodes with the FlexiPulse needle. And this really is our strength. It's both the pulse technology combined with our needles. So exciting stuff, and he'll be presenting to over 1,000 radiologists who will be in attendance there, and it'll be very much on an American platform, which is actually quite difficult for foreign studies to be accepted and presented there. So we really hope that this will give us a step up in exposure in the US and kind of a pre-platform for the commercialization that Magnus Precht will be working toward.
Yes. There's a small question here from one of the participants, Aaron.
Yes.
And it's more about the needles, the differences between the needles and the pulse system, and also how long are you protected in terms of patents? Could you elaborate a little on that?
That's a great question. We actually had a meeting this week about our patent technology, and we have protection with the technology across all of our needles. And without wanting to get it wrong, we have protection for a number of years. But I think I can I can find the actual number of years that we have protection for. But it is a significant amount of time.
Yeah, good. And the differences between the needles, because that's also one of the value propositions in your product compared to traditional biopsy.
Yes. Well, I mean, we have the protection on the up until 2035. I've recently been notified, so we have protection to 2035. But the actual is actually the underlying technology that we have the patent on. And then what we do is within that technology, we start to add different patents for different the different parts of the product. But again, I wouldn't be able to answer specifically on each of the needles, unfortunately.
Yeah, but more in terms of the use of the needles, Aaron.
Okay, yeah, the use of the needles. Okay, so that's
okay.
Makes sense. So, I mean, the Flexi needle is really the needle where we use for kind of very difficult biopsies. Essentially, it's a long needle that extracts tissue from essentially the end. It's a very thin needle as well. And that's the needle that we are pushing really in the US at the moment. And the other two needles take a different angle on the way they extract tissue from a biopsy through vacuum-assisted methods, essentially. I would certainly encourage whoever wants to know more about it to really go on the website and have a look underneath the technology itself, and it can explain it in a much more illustrative way than I can probably say right now.
Yeah, but thanks a lot, Aaron.
And then, I mean, the final slide is really NeoDynamics in brief, and I wanted to talk about the volumes, but we kind of touched on it earlier, that the volumes in the US will be driven by a partnership in some form with a third party, because our plan really isn't to invest in a heavy and large sales force to scale up the business. We want to deliver production volumes to the market in a variety of different ways, which we are working on. And we're certainly watching and listening closely to the market to determine the most appropriate way forwards. But I think it's important to set that expectation, because I think perhaps the market has this belief that we'll have this kind of very quick ramp up. And whilst that may be the case, I think it's also important to appreciate the medtech industry and how things work. These things do take time, and we have been unfortunately affected by a number of circumstances that we didn't have control over. But yeah, that's essentially what we plan to do.
So in these different, if we just very quickly, you have 3 partners as of today, or 3 large partners as of today. Is it the same type of partnership, the same type of agreement? Can you elaborate a little on that, and how much will you be involved in that process? And the third question, are you going to do sales yourself also in the market? So you divide the market between the partners and what you want to do yourself in the US, of course.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back, I think there may be a bit of misunderstanding. We don't. When I show, I'll just go back to the slide with the diagram here. So I mean, the 3 largest players, they're not actually necessarily direct partners of ours at the moment. These are just players in the market. But going back to your question about how we kind of build the volumes up, I mean, partnership through a form of distribution agreement is certainly one way to do this. I mean, there are other different ways, but again, we're deciding on the best way forwards.
Sure. Yeah. Still early days, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you penetrate some of the market with Prect and some of his people as well, or?
Well, I mean, he'll be very much responsible for the commercialization in the US. And when we say his people, I mean, it will probably be contacts that he has from his time in the US. I think he spent over 20 years there. So he's very well positioned for leading this project. So he will no doubt have probably some preferred candidates that he would like to work with, not only from a business perspective internally, but also from a partnership perspective externally.
Then there's a question here from one of the participants. Is there a risk that a larger player may buy NeoDynamics?
Well, I mean, I think it's a bit. I mean, it's as everybody's seen in the news this week with Elon Musk, trying to force his way into Twitter. There is some controls in place in terms of what the board have available to them, and I don't think necessarily that we would see that type of action from anybody in particular, and that's not something we certainly would want to plan for either.
No.
But I mean, in terms of the market cap of the business, I mean, investors really aren't prepared to pay up front for a turnaround case, which is why we're trading at a low market cap at the minute. But I think the most important thing for the business is to make sure that those milestones that we have in our strategy are executed, and they're executed well. And so far, we've seen that we are doing that this year.
Well, yeah, you have really been working a lot to get to. Yeah, first of all, it's not long ago you were only Europe, and now you're on your way to US. So you really speed up the process.
Yeah,
and that's also a way to what can you say, to hold out hostile bidders if you do a good case. So I really agree, Aaron.
And we're very much trying to be as visible as possible, which is why we really appreciate these events with you, and why we do road shows and things like that, because we do really want to not only get the product out there in terms of people understanding what it does, but also what we as a business expect from ourselves.
Then there's another question coming in here. How do you hold on to key personnel? That's a very good question, I think. And especially when you grow and you start to be more visible in the US.
Exactly. I mean, there's obviously the fundamental part, which is obviously everybody receives a salary, but I think more so than that, we have a very good and strong business culture within the organization. And I think that from my experience, that is a key contributor to people feeling happy, valued, and seen in an organization. If you can hold a high level of ethics and morale and things that you do inside the business, that naturally makes people want to stay.
I fully agree.
And I mean, I've joined the business quite recently, and I can say firsthand that the way that the business is run, and also the people that are on board, we all strive for the same thing, and we are all very, very keen to help each other. There is no silos in the business. The organization is fairly flat, and everybody has the opportunity to speak out and also to voice their opinions.
Yeah, you actually took a step from a larger company to NeoDynamics.
Exactly, and I think that's a very good point, because as businesses grow, sometimes they can lose their culture along the way. So it's something certainly to be mindful of. But as I mentioned before, when it comes to the scalability of the business, we're not looking to build out an enormous machine.
No,
we very much will hopefully leverage on a partner and their sales force to take NeoDynamics, I guess, forward in that respect. And when I say take it forward, I mean what we want really is to kind of develop multiple indications, because with multiple indications you have multiple legs to stand on.
So now you start with breast cancer, which is of course a very big and major area, but there's other big areas as well where you can use your technology.
Exactly, and there are many indications where our technology is actually could be seen as very, very useful.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions from the audience. If not, Aaron, I would like to thanks a lot for your briefly update and from the discussion we had around US. I really look forward to meet you again online and present you for the audience. And I would also like to thank the audience for the questions.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for hosting me, and thank you for all the questions.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So thanks a lot, and enjoy your day.
You too. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.